All right. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the SGDA Summit 2022. This is the art panel. We got three incredible artists here to talk about things such as UI art, art direction, and environment art. And how about we just have them introduce themselves, starting with Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Ovina. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a UI UX lead at Obsidian.
Okay. Next, feel free to jump in whenever I ask questions too. So I guess Lauren can go next.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Brown, she, her pronouns. I'm currently art director at Wild Seed Games and previously associate art director at Zynga and art lead at EA.
And hey, I'm Joby. I'm a lead environment artist at Respawn Entertainment. And yeah, he, him pronouns.
Okay. Thank you very much. I guess first question I want to ask is, how did you end up working in the game industry? Was this something that you kind of wanted to go into for several years, or was something you kind of just stumbled into? Joby, do you want to talk about that and how you got into games?
A little bit of both in a weird way. Because originally I was kind of not going that way. I was kind of going the typical kind of Asian sun route of like doctor, engineer, or something like that. But kind of realized I'm good at math and science and all that, but I don't really enjoy it. And yeah, games was always kind of just like a thing. And I think the game that did for me was like Half-Life 2 at the time, where I was just kind of realized like, oh, this could actually be a career. And it kind of started off for me and kind of got into modding and all that stuff. And that's what got me started.
Okay. Anybody want to add on to that, their experience?
Sure. So I actually started my career in animation, in the animation industry. And I've always been an artist basically my entire life, but I've always loved games and animation ever since I was really little. So I knew that one of both of those paths would be something that I really wanted to do. And I kind of stumbled into getting into the game industry once one of my friends who had left my animation studio was like, hey, you should come over and apply to the game industry. There's a job opening at EA. I think this would be perfect for you. And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I've never made games before. I don't know how to make games, but I might as well apply anyway, just to see what will happen. Who knows? And then 2 months later, I was moving away from Atlanta and going into Austin. And I was like, I'm about to work in the games. This is weird. This is really weird. So kind of fell into it that way. But my experience transferred over in a way that worked out for me. And I've been there ever since.
For me, I went to school for it, so I did actually intend to get into game development. I actually thought I wanted to just do something with art. For the longest time, I started in, traditional art, as you do when there's not digital means to make art, and was part of some local college career fair day where they sort of took art students through and showed them digital art as a major that you could major in at this college. And it was very, rough, very like 3D animation for like movie theater intros and stuff. And it was very like, this in and of itself is not exciting to me, but the fact that there is even a possibility to be a digital artist, that I didn't even know that door was open or even how to start that. And seeing that this was a thing that students were getting knowledge about, and so could apply to something that was not necessarily render some 3D scene and send that off as a something for somebody else to use in their project. And since I just grew up loving video games, I just wanted to apply digital art to making video games and kind of just took off from there.
Okay, that's great to hear. As a follow-up, I kind of want to know, how did you get into your job position, and how did you figure out what type of art you wanted to pursue in the actual career path? I guess, Lauren, why don't you start us off with that?
So it's actually funny because when I went to SCAD for my grad degree, and I went as an illustration major because what I wanted to do was to do visual development and character design for animation and, potentially films and things like that. So I always thought I wanted to be a character designer. And I ended up working on about probably 9 student films when I was at SCAD. I wasn't even an animation major, but like I just went over to that building and, people would recruit me all the time and be like, hey, like, can you do character design? So I thought that's what I was going to do. But when I got my first job, I actually ended up as an environment artist when I was in animation. And did backgrounds and all kinds of things. So it kind of went in a path that I didn't expect, but I really enjoyed it all the same. But as I moved forward in my career, I also was asked to be a lead, for artists, a director of my department, of the background department. And I think that's how I got started on my path towards art direction. Because originally I didn't expect to even be in a leadership position. I thought that I was just going to be, a baseline artist for my career. And then suddenly I realized I really enjoyed leadership. And that's how I kind of like got forward and went into the game industry as a leader and continued until I became, an art director, which has been really rewarding and enjoyable so far. So yeah, the path was different for me, but it was fun to discover it.
Yeah, for me, like I went to school as well for kind of just 3D in general. So it was like a pretty generalist program. So we did everything from like modeling, texturing, animation, rigging. And I think I quickly realized within like the first year or so that like animation and rigging wasn't totally my thing. And like I was kind of definitely skewing towards like kind of modeling and texturing. And more so just for like for environments, more so than like say characters or whatnot. So from then on, I kind of just like really just focused on that during most those 3 years in school. So yeah, like I didn't quite make it into games proper right away. Like my first job was like working for a small company back in Montreal, where I was born and raised, of where we were working on like content for like serious games and like military sims and stuff like that. And then then made my way to Ubisoft in Toronto. And that was my first gig there as like a modeler, just kind of prop modeler to start off. Yeah.
I also kind of just fell into it accident. I don't know that at the time there was a lot of like directing folks into UI UX. It was more just a very generalist program, very like, oh, you take the art track and you sort of learn 3D modeling and texturing and 2D whenever the project suits that sort of art. Um, and I ended up leaving feeling like I wasn't a terribly strong 3D artist in any way because I did a lot of little things, but nothing really that I thought was setting me up for success. So I was looking for a lot of 2D jobs, did some concept, did some 2D animation. And then a friend of mine was working at a small studio that was looking for what he said was a 2D artist, and it really skewed a lot more UI. So then I had to sort of learn what a UI artist was and hop right in. But then I realized how much I enjoyed it, and it really was sort of the culmination of everything that I like to do with art and tech and design. So stuck with it.
Thank you so much. You do kind of bring up interesting question about working in UI. This can be a question for everybody, but do you find that the genre of game impacts what kind of art you create? Because I know that you worked on rhythm games and also FPS games, so I kind of want to know if that the actual like genre game or game design actually kind of influences that.
Yeah, no, actually, I think it's for me, there's sort of building a process of what it is uh, to take something from the broad strokes ideas of what is meant to be the general art direction for the game and apply that to UI. And so there's, the process of getting that source of inspiration, taking that through like visual target mock-ups and things like that that you can build out pre-production artwork, and then getting that approved and then bringing that to implementation, doing each screen, each feature, all of those things are very much the same process. It's just sort of applying different different art styles to that process. So that might mean that there's a lot more vector art or a lot more materials work, or that there's more hand-drawn work. But a lot of times it's really much more about how is this contributing to the overall artistic vision of the game? How can I make what I need to make that serves that vision based on the team size we have and the time we have, and like what ways can I make things so that we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel every single time. So the process doesn't really change too much. It's based on the art style. It's definitely much more on team size and time that the process changes for me.
I see both of you are nodding along, so that kind of true for both you too.
A little bit different for environment art, I'd say. Like, at least just kind of like in the AAA space, like I've kind of worked on mostly kind of like FPSs and third-person games and whatnot, and kind of like switching between single player and multiplayer. And like, there's definitely a big difference as far as like, especially in single player and multiplayer. Like for example, on Apex, like we just have like a much more bigger emphasis on just kind of player readability with the environment and kind of making sure that they pop well, and just as far as like landmarking as well, like when you're working on like different zones, just so it's like easy for people to call out where they are, and like you don't have to like think about it too much, right? You want to oversell that. But for example, like a single player, when I was like working on Jedi, that was like a much more directed experience. You have like control over like the full composition and like what the player's looking at and what's going on. So it's like you can really push the fidelity and just like yeah, just push a lot more in that sense there, given it's like a little bit more on rails in a way. But yeah, some of the big differences there.
Yeah, and as for art direction, just specifically on every different game, the process has varied wildly depending on, again, like Mary was saying, team size is a big factor, the kind of game you're working on, what platform you're going to be making the game for, because I've worked in largely the mobile game sector throughout my time at EA and Zynga, but now I'm working on a AAA game, and the process has, changed again. There's certain things that you have to take into consideration when you're creating a game that's in a fully 3D environment versus something that's open world versus something that's hub and spoke, what the kind of genre you're working in. So it definitely varies, and it requires you to be adaptable and flexible as possible, because you will, as an artist, you'll also have to tailor your art style to fit those games too, and that can be definitely a challenge. And it takes, again, good art direction and also a solid style guide to make sure that everybody can fit within those parameters of that style that you have to work in. But your personal take on art and your personal artistic vision helps you along the way with, if there's any room for you to infuse your personality into it, you can. But for the most part, what comes first and foremost is making sure that the art in the game feels seamless for what its purpose is. So it's really important for young students to consider, like just young artists to consider, that you won't always, get your style into a game. It has to conform to what the game is.
All right, thank you so much. I noticed all of you also have experience either working as a self-employed artist or a freelancer, but you've also worked in studios. So I guess I kind of want to know, what's the big difference between working as either a freelancer, self-employed artist, and people that works in a studio? Joby, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I only had like a very brief stint as like a freelancer, like I think before I joined Ubisoft, and I was like, I need to make up money to do this move. And so yeah, super short thing. I was like probably lowballing myself way too much as far as like what I was making. But yeah, I quickly realized when I was doing that, I was just like, no, I'm very excited to kind of get into a studio and working with people in person. Just kind of hilarious now given COVID, but and yeah, no, like the studio environment's just kind of nice. Just got a lot nice and collaborative. Yeah, just get to work closely with like say like other artists and a level designer. And now with the transition COVID too, like it's definitely different, but like I guess I've tried as much as possible to try to maintain like those same links, since like might not be able to just drop by someone's desk as easily anymore, but now it's like, oh, Pokemon Slack, and you're like, hey, you want to jump on a quick Zoom call, and then you kind of just jam and screen share on stuff there. And so just try to recreate that as much as possible. But yeah, definitely enjoyed the studio environment overall.
I've been freelancing alongside working full time in a studio since I started my career 11 years ago. So it's been a delicate balancing act between, basically creating my own personal work or creating things for another, studio or some kind of place versus my full time job, and not allowing myself to burn out, which I've dramatically failed at. I actually decided to stop taking on freelance very recently, just because I can't balance that anymore, and I would much rather focus on my own personal work. But as a freelancer, I have gone on hiatus before for 2-3 months at a time from animation, and I did like the freedom of freelancing, and I did like the ability to set your own schedule, and you have your own space to just create what you need to create. But I do also enjoy the structure of a studio environment and being able to be there in person and talking to people. I currently work fully remote now, so it's a different experience once again, because I'll never go into one place where we all belong. And we found ways to accommodate that. So, it's still been an enjoyable experience, regardless of the fact that we can't do it in person, but I really do miss in person. But yeah, as a freelancer, you also have to worry about, if you're only doing freelance and no studio environment, you have to worry about a lot of different things, like, where's your next paycheck going to come from? Or, like your health insurance, or, just like there's many different things. So it's a lifestyle that suits certain personalities and certain types of people. But I have always wanted my cake and eating, I like to have my cake and eat it too. And that's what I've been doing. I've chosen one or the other. But there's certain dangers in that as well. Like burnout. Don't burn out, everybody. It's bad.
My experience with freelance is sort of out of necessity rather than by choice. So I definitely have maybe some slightly more positive feeling towards being at a studio than I do the time that I had been freelance. And I think it is along those lines of what Lauren said about just like you have to worry about where your next paycheck is coming from, and like you have to spend a bunch of time building relationships so that you can get repeat contract work with folks that you've worked with in the past. And how much time do you have that you can actually really dedicate in a day to the work, and what happens when there's not work coming in versus a ton of work coming in at the same time, and the risk of burning out and all of that. But I do also think there's just something that has to be a lot more self-directed about your own personal growth in that time while you're freelance, that is more helpful at a studio where you are and your personal growth is an investment for the studio as well as yourself, that being able to take on more things and grow as an employee is also something that there's going to be more people who want to see that from you, where if you're contracted out to do something, then it's more likely that there's a scenario that people are trying to make sure concludes in a good place, and so your work is contributing toward making something, I need this many icons or I need this screen. And once that's complete, they're not going to be necessarily looking for ways that you can grow into a role that can do more things than what you've been contracted to do, because your contract says this is what you're here to do and this is how much you're here to get for that. And so you may be contacted later, but it's probable that when that is done, you've seen whatever personal growth you wanted to see out of that, but it's not being driven by multiple people who are invested in that.
All right, thank you very much. Next question I kind of want to ask is, I guess, what kind of impact or goal do you try to reach with your art? That can also just be, just following the art director's design, or I guess, tell me if you're doing well, like what's your goal as maybe like either an environment artist or UI artist? Well, how if you're doing a good job, I guess, or art director too. I guess, Lauren, you can lead us out with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's different when you're a manager or an art director, because the well-being and productivity and just happiness overall of your team is the indicator on whether or not you're doing well as an art director, as well as obviously, if the art that's being created is, the appropriate art that fits the tone of the game, if it's impactful, if it's beautiful, if the players can understand what you're trying to say with the art on first read without you having to tell them specifically. But mainly for me, the best indicator is the well-being of my team. If my team feels comfortable enough to come to me and talk to me candidly about like, hey, like, you know, today I'm not having a good brain day. I can't really focus today. Or like saying like, oh, I feel like I'm weaker in this area. I would really like to grow that with you. Can you help me? That kind of confidence in you as a manager is a really good litmus test. And if I can get my team to get to that point, I will know that I've done a good job in my role. So that's mainly what I use to indicate my work. But as an individual baseline artist, like an artist who's like creating, I think it's an individual contributor. There's going to be different indicators. So please take it away, y'all.
Yeah, on the environment art end, yeah, for the most part, like for myself and for any team I'm managing, I'm like, the biggest thing is at the end of the day, we're game artists, right? So it's like, it's not about making the prettiest art. It's about making art that serves the game and like enhances the design and complements it. So it's like, for me, it's always kind of have that top of mind. Like I'm always like wanting to collaborate with level designers, like designers, and try to make sure that our stuff is kind of coalescing and contributing to each other nicely. So yeah, that's the biggest thing, because yeah, if the game isn't fun and it's pretty, it doesn't do much. So it's like has to be both. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna second a lot of the things that have already been said, but for sure, just like making sure that what I'm producing, what the team is producing, is communicative, that it's readable, understandable, that it's you know, trying to be as accessible as we can make it. And then I guess as a manager, again, the same sort of like making sure that people feel that they have a voice on the team, that they feel like they are um, not being I don't know, I guess lost, that there's something that is clear expectation setting from all sides, being able to communicate to within the team to other folks outside the team, setting expectations and making sure that people feel like they have the amount of control over their piece of the game that they feel is you know, making them feel like they're doing good work.
Thank you. I guess the next question I want to ask is, I know a lot of students are worried about like harassment in the industry. I don't know if you have any advice for game devs of color, women, non-binary individuals that want to go into games.
Plenty. I mean, I've been in this industry for a while now, and as a Black woman, which is a rarity in the industry, it adds a whole nother layer of an aspect of work to hurdle, because you not only have to focus on your job and your role and, you know, the team and making sure that everything's going well, but you also have to focus on the fact that people may misjudge you or may assume things about you or may treat you differently because of what you look like, or, you know, what you identify as, you know, like various different things that I wish I didn't have to worry about. I will say it's less of an issue once being in the remote sector, just because, you know, I'm just kind of a talking head more so than this, you know, person that people have questions about. But like, for example, at, you know, like back when I was at EA, there were like a bunch of like training courses around diversity and things like that. And I would always be the person that my, you know, white colleagues would come to me after and like ask me like questions about like, oh, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And this is after, you know, having been in a course for like 4 hours of my day, having to kind of have the exhaustion of, you know, hearing a lot of ignorant questions and things like that. And people would always look to me to be the educator, but they wouldn't realize that that being that educator is an addition to what I'm already here to do. And that is an extra mental toll that I have to take on that everybody else does not have to take on. So, you know, there's things that are invisible, you know, microaggressions, many things like that, that you have to kind of take on as a part of your role, unfortunately. And yeah, I think a lot of people are not aware of that, especially if they don't have to be a part of a marginalized community, you know, to not see that, like, oh, like, why do you feel so exhausted today? And it's like, it's hard to explain it. And it's also been hard to explain it to my managers as well, if they don't understand where I'm coming from or my identity. So it can be exhausting, but I've also spent my time being an advocate for the industry and trying to get more diversity into the industry of all, you know, of all types, and facilitating better equity. So there's been work done there, but it's a long way to go.
Yeah, I wish I had more specific things about advice or anything, but I am coming up short, frankly. I think there's a lot of things that uh, uh, your competence is always in question, and that feeling like you know, somebody might be doing something, um, questioning something of yours because of just who you are, is uh, tiring. And it's tiring to keep having to prove that, you know, you're capable of doing a job that you've been doing. Um, but I think it's just, you know, the onus shouldn't be on the people who have to handle that. But unfortunately, if that's part of the work environment that you're experiencing, then you have to experience it. Um, and I guess, you know, the recommendations that I could make for students who are about to experience that would be to keep finding your community and building your community and making that be something that, um, you will always have somebody who's there who can understand what it is you're experiencing without having to explain, um, just at least to make one interaction a little bit easier. Um, but I think it's you know, it's on the folks who are in leadership positions, myself included, to make that change be something that is required, that we need to do internally to make ourselves better. That this is something that, um, you know, if you're having to tolerate this, you know, sorry that this is a thing that is going to occur for you, but uh, I don't have a thing that I think is the way to make you feel better about that, you know? So, uh, but it is something that there are there are people who are actively changing this. This is something that requires active change. It's not something that people can just say thumbs up, we're allies, we're doing a good job. It doesn't help. So people need to work on this, and that's something that, um, uh, we can all do better at. I am doing some, uh, as I can as an individual. Um, I am uh, sorry that I don't have a more positive.
No, I think just having your community, I think that's definitely helped many people I know. Um, but I think we've gone over questions that I prepared for 30 minutes. So now we're going to turn over to questions that the audience has asked. So first one is, how would you like other departments to approach you as an artist asking you for assets? Or what do you want like other departments to kind of keep in mind when, I guess, interacting with artists? Joby, you can start this one off.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to start is that, like, you know, don't even see it as just like kind of like coming in asking for an asset. Like, make it a collaborative process and bring us in and as early on as possible, so that, like, Yeah, it's a collaborative process between whichever department you're at, if you're like narrative or design or whatnot, just so we can kind of brainstorm on it, come up with the best possible thing that you need, and kind of best possible result that'll work both for you and for us, essentially. Not just like a list that you just throw over and you're like, all right, we're cool.
Yeah, my current studio facilitates that kind of collaboration, especially in a place like that where we're a smaller organization. So all of us kind of like have to be talking to each other and should be talking to each other. So I think the more departments speak to each other, the better understanding each of them have of their roles and can be more empathetic to their needs and concerns. So I think it's always really important to do. I think other departments should not make demands of artists or, you know, be like, hey, this is required. This has to happen right now. That is up to the producer to determine like where that lands in the schedule. And I see that mistake being made a lot. So, you know, if you're getting a mandate from another department, always check with your manager first and see like if that's a priority or not, because that can, you know, throw off a lot of things in the process. Just going with that one for one. But overall, collaboration between departments is a very good thing.
I think it also helps to have goals rather than specifics about what it is that people are meant to deliver. That especially saying like, oh, I want to be able to do this action, or basically basing it in sort of player experience rather than I need this screen. It's like, oh, I don't understand why you need this yet, so let's just talk about that first, and then we'll figure out if that's actually the answer.
All right, thank you very much. Next question is, in terms of building a portfolio, do you recommend building an art portfolio based around the type of game you want to work on? Or should you be building around a specific type of art, like weapons, environment assets? So I guess kind of style versus content.
I have very strong opinions about this.
Good, I want to hear them.
So as somebody who is a hiring manager, what I mainly look for in artist portfolios, obviously, like, yes, like if you're wanting to go for a specific skill set, like in 3D, 2D, whatever that is, obviously I want to see that you can accomplish those things, you know, in a really amazing fashion. But the thing that's most important to me is to see an artist's voice and to see like what kind of like art they feel valuable to them and what they, you know, kind of like what they say with their work. And it doesn't have to be anything conceptual. I think artistic voice is something that is very much like you have been creating the things that you are interested in, and therefore I know your voice because you have been, you know, creating things that you are passionate about. That always comes through in a portfolio more so than somebody who is just trying to cater their portfolio to a specific studio, because I feel like that's putting all your eggs in one basket, and that's not really a good approach to do. What I would much rather see is that person's voice come through. It's like, oh, clearly they love making these like really cool, like beautiful weapons. They're, you know, prop maker. That's fine, but like the kinds of things that you make should be up to you, and shouldn't just be trying to mimic what another studio has already created.
As far as like the AAA space, yeah, like specifically kind of just like speaking to environment art too, like I think you definitely need to cater your portfolio around that specific type of art. Like it's hard for us, for example, for like say someone that comes in with like a portfolio full of weapons that we're just like, it's hard for us to project like, okay, like are you going to be able to build an environment like knowing that you can kind of do weapons, right? So if you're going for like environment art, it's really, yeah, more environment art focused portfolio where that like you might have just like one really good scene, honestly, and then that kind of includes everything from kind of world building to lighting to adding your own touch with kind of like environmental storytelling and stuff like that. And then yeah, even just like a couple of good props to kind of supplement that, and really that's all you need. That's like kind of really focusing on really quality over quantity. Because that's a mistake I see students do a lot of, where their eyes are definitely bigger than their stomach. Am I getting that backwards? But yeah, like in a lot of mentorships I do, they just come like, I want to do this massive scene and then I was like, all right, so we need to kind of like do this, and then you need to make this really well. That can kind of keep in the back of your mind for future projects, for like as you grow. But like, yeah, just focus on quality over quantity. It's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful to see solid pieces that get fundamentals right, and that it's not necessarily about the style being what exactly I'm looking for. And I think it's helpful to sort of set yourself up as appearing to be more of a style chameleon, that you can like come in and be somebody who can do, oh, I have to do this one style, but this is so unique to the game that we're making that it would be, how could you know it in advance? So being able to show off that you can do, a number of different style approaches, that is more helpful for, oh, okay, I think they can learn this. But if they can show like, oh, I know how to do iconography, I have good silhouettes, I understand that the thing that I need to do primarily is communicate first, and make, something stylistic that works with a number of different things. That's always much more helpful than, oh, I took this one game and did all these screen redos of this, and now I don't know what to make of this necessarily.
All right, thank you. Mary, you actually have a question specific towards you. It's audience members asking what's the difference between UI and UX. Maybe you could expand on that and say, I guess, how much of either do you feel like you're doing in your job?
Oh, I would love to. Um, I think it's a thing that also is just kind of not everybody really knows what the even in a professional space. So yeah, UI is well, there, if we're talking UI art and UX design. So UX design is around experiential problem solving, about making sure that this is appropriate communication flow, user-based functionality. So this is around building an experience, so like UX, that is striving to be as good to use, as easy to use, as comfortable to use. Consistency and application of consistent input styles, all these things that are just like around the experience of interacting with not just an interface, but we need to also think more broadly about the player experience, and how UX can contribute to the player experience in, outside of just the HUD and menus, that this is also just how do you parse the world around you. And then UI art is about how do we apply stylistic and typography and layout rules to visually communicate, so that you are, in addition to functionally building something that has good bones, that you also have this artistic layer that is built into the interface that communicates, again, makes the UI look like it is part of the game, that is building upon those foundational elements. So it's sort of a more artistic skewed communication, and UX is more about the design of communication. And then there's also UI engineering, which is, again, separate from all of those, which is about using all of that knowledge and the specifics of working in UI UX to then generate functional, behavioral, performant user interfaces that are as modular as we need them to be, and as performant as we need them to be, and solving technical problems and building things such that artists can come in and build out the artistic version of those things, and designers can also be able to interact with these component pieces. So it's very much all of them working collaboratively. So those divides can be a little messy, but those are very much like the overall broad strokes differences between those things. And for as what I do, I sort of hopped in a long time ago, and the differences between these things were not very defined. So I've been doing this for 15 years. So I just I was the UI person on certain teams where there wasn't, we'd have engineers, but they weren't dedicated UI engineers. And there was no UX designer. So the stuff that I will end up doing is kind of a messy mix of all of the things, depending on what I need to do, especially in a sort of lead position where whatever the needs are that aren't being met, I will try to hop in and make that work. So right now I'm very UX focused because there's a lot of dependencies on the UX being solid. So uh, it is a messy answer, but I think it is also pretty clear where those divides broadly are.
All right, thank you very much. My next question is, I wanted to know what's working as an art lead or director differ from a non-leadership role. Lauren, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as somebody who did a transition directly from, being an artist to being a director, they don't tell you how much art you're not able to do anymore. And it usually catches a lot of new managers and directors off guard because they're like, well, why can't I produce like fast anymore? And you realize you're spending your time reviewing and looking after the project and well-being and organizing things and talking to other departments. There's a lot of structural stuff that you have to deal with on top of sometimes you still get to create art assets and sometimes you don't. But I think one of the biggest lessons that I had learned was delegation is really, really important, and trusting your team to be able to take on the things that you cannot do anymore. It takes a lot of learning and a lot of maturity to be able to accept that you can't handle everything anymore. So I think that's the biggest difference, because you're not just like heads down focusing on your own tasks anymore. You're seeing everything at a higher level and trying to make sure that everything stays on the rails as much as possible. So it's a pretty big difference, but both of them are rewarding in their own rights.
Yeah, it's definitely like a big mindset shift. Kind of went through that recently as I stepped into like the lead role, where it's like, yeah, because your brain's just so wired as like an individual contributor and kind of just making art, and then after now you're gonna have to really pull back and kind of just see the big picture and looking after team health and like their workload and making sure they're all good and kind of growing in all their own ways too. So it's like, yeah, like Lauren mentioned, like big part of it is delegation, trusting your people, like hiring the right people that you can trust and really lean on to really do their thing, and then just help them grow. Like, I think my job as a lead is like definitely a big part of it is like, yeah, like looking after people's careers, like knowing what they want, what their goals are, like try to roadmap that with them, and ultimately just kind of like, it's almost like succession planning. It's like you want to build the next set of leaders that will go into the next game, and like, yeah, you want to make yourself replaceable at the end of the day, in a way.
Yeah, for sure. There's a sort of sadness initially on like, oh, I can't do as much work. I'm in a lot of meetings. And then I think there's eventually a point where you sort of go, oh, it's highly important that I be in these meetings, and I'm glad that I'm involved, and it's important that we have these conversations, and it's um you sort of switch that. Oh, okay, yes, I see. Okay, it is very important to be the one who's uh enforcing process and setting up process and helping people get where they want to be, and giving people an opportunity to express what they would like to see out of their careers, and being able to help push people in directions that they would be excited to go in, and also just like expectation setting and making sure that people have a clear idea of what it is that the team is doing, and what it is that we will need to personally do to get there. And yeah, it's a lot more organization and planning and process, and it's all very important. But yeah, you get to do that at the expense of some speed that you just had spent your life building up, making assets.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I'm going to ask my closing question. I guess, do you have any like general advice for students that are, I guess, taking their first steps into the industry and getting hired?
So yeah, kind of like what I was saying earlier, as far as like your portfolio, just always focus on quality over quantity. Don't feel that you need to like fill it out and have like a dozen pieces, several pieces. Like, all you really need is like 1 or 2 good pieces, and that's more than enough, honestly, to get your foot in the door. And like once you're in the door too, it's like, yeah, be humble, like just be a sponge, like soak up like all the knowledge, like lean on like the seniors that are on your team. Like don't be afraid to ask questions. Like you feel sometimes like when you start, you're like afraid and like kind of nervous to like lean on people and ask them questions, but go for it. Like we're all here to help, and like we know it's you're just starting out, so we're a lot more lenient. So yeah.
Yeah, my advice, first, I have two parts as well about portfolio. One of the things that I always tell people when they're trying to figure out how to craft their portfolio, go on LinkedIn, look for the role that you want at the studio that you want to work for, like at your dream studio, and then see who's actually doing that role. And then look at their portfolios and see how they set it up, what kinds of things that they've shown, and how they decided to structure it and format it. I'm not saying at all, do not copy these people's work, make your own work, but it gives you an idea of the presentation and the quality that somebody in that role needs to have. And it should give a good indicator on what you have to, have in your portfolio in order to be considered. And you'll see many different people often have very like widely varied portfolios. So it can really help you provide like a litmus test just to see, what other people are doing. It's always really been helpful for me, and I hope it's really helpful for you too. And the second one is just don't be a jerk. Be somebody who's easy to work with, who who is good at collaborating, good at communicating. Do not burn bridges, because this industry is so small, and I guarantee you people will pop up in unexpected situations all over the country, all over the world. And so you do not want to have a bad reputation following you. So be a good person to work with and be good to people as you're working.
I think it's one thing that I would say is to find a community and that become actively part of that community, that game dev community in your area or on Discord or whatever it is, so that there's some insight into what it is that you would be asked to do as a new artist, and what it is that sort of the aspirational things that you would be looking for in the future, and just see what it is that if you have questions, if you have things that you would feel interested in. There's meetups, and there's panels, and there's talks and things, and just seek those things out so that you're not feeling so lost, because I think it's easy to sort of get confused about what the future is when your current community is like a college campus, where it's very much like the expectations are clear about what that is, but the future expectations are unclear. And be cognizant of not trying to take people's time. If you are putting something out there, don't just sort of like dump on people like, I want to know all these things and I picked you. But there's a difference between that and like posing a question in a Discord, or like reaching out to people who've said that they're happy to answer questions in particular contexts. So finding that information out so you don't feel so lost, I think that is a helpful way to transition to a more professional environment.
All right, thank you so much. That's about all the time we have for this panel, and I want everybody to thank the panelists that have come to this SGDA summit and for contributing their time to talk to us about what their work is and the different advice for students. So thank you so much for coming. I hope you have a wonderful day. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.